Welcome to the Forum for Expatriate Management's 2020 Asia Pacific Online Summit. Proudly supported by our sponsors: Air Inc., Alto Vita, HSBC, and Removal Management Worldwide. Global mobility and HR professionals, welcome to the Forum for Expatriate Management's 2020 Asia Pacific Online Summit. Please welcome FEM's Global Director of Content and Events and your Summit Chair, Claire Tennant-Scull.
Hello, and a very warm welcome to FEM's 2020 APAC Online Summit. My name is Claire Tennant-Scull. I'm the Global Director of Content and Events here at FEM, and I'm your Summit Chair. To help support the global mobility community in these challenging times, we have been broadcasting a series of webinars as well as an Americas Summit in the last few months. And we are, of course, disappointed that it's not possible to hold our APAC Summit in Singapore this year, but I'm very pleased to say that I think we have a great online event for you instead. So I hope you're joining us for the live broadcast, but of course the great benefit of digital events is that you can tune in or watch them on demand anytime or from anywhere. So it's wonderful to be able to welcome attendees not just from the APAC region, but from right across the globe. So despite, or perhaps because of, all the current travel restrictions, many in the mobility community are busier than ever. And with this in mind, we've put together 2 days of great content, but in bite-sized portions. So we have panel discussions on talent management, relocating in the new normal, and global mobility excellence, as well as 2 superb mobility masterclasses and 2 expert insight interviews on both banking considerations and virtual assignments. In addition to all this, there will be a webinar on September the 16th, which will be a follow-up session to Emery Castañeda's masterclass. This will be an interactive workshop, and it's where participants can work through a number of case studies in real time with Emery, but it will be a limited number of participants only. So the link to register for this will be available straight after Emery's introductory class. Throughout our broadcasts, we will periodically show you the agenda, and there will be some short breaks in between. You can check your emails or grab some refreshments. But we'll give you a countdown clock to remind you when the presentation is about to start. You can find more details about all our speakers and the agenda on our website, and we'll give you that address too. So I do hope you find these sessions useful and engaging. I must thank all our speakers who've so generously shared their expertise and time to prepare for this event. I'd also like to thank all our sponsors, Air Inc., Alto Vita, HSBC, and Removals Management Worldwide, for supporting this event and for being such a pleasure to work with. Now, without further ado, let's begin our opening panel discussion. Many thanks again to the panel for their insights.
Developing and optimizing talent in APAC. Your speakers are Jane Line, APAC Regional Head, Talent Mobility Operations Strategy at Johnson & Johnson. Ava Liu, Total Rewards Program Lead, APAC at Cargill. And Charlotte Stevenson, Global Talent Officer at the Australian Government. Moderated by Claire Tennant-Scull, Global Director of Content and Events at FEM.
Okay, and hello and welcome to this keynote panel, our opening panel for our APAC Online Summit. I'm very pleased to be joined by 3 distinguished speakers today. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves in a moment, but I'll just outline briefly what we're going to talk about and how we're going to structure that discussion. So we're talking about developing and optimizing talent in the APAC region. As you probably know, Asia is the world's largest manufacturing hub, And it's predicted that by 2030, I think, the region is expected to contribute around 60% of global growth. So it really is a very diverse and thriving area for the world, as we know. I think the COVID pandemic may have some effect on things, and we don't want to dwell on that too much. But we want to explore some of the ways that organisations can maximise, attract, and develop talent and deploy it, of course, in the region. And we're also asking what the future holds for the sort of traditional expat model. So we're going to look at this in three parts. Part one, I'm going to ask everyone why they think a talent strategy is important and how it aligns with global mobility. And then part two, what are the particular challenges in moving talent in, out, and around the region? And how do we strengthen the talent pool, as it were? And then part three, this is the sort of the shortest part of the discussion, I guess, is just a quick recap. Is the expat model still relevant? What do we see as the future for relocation in APAC? So, panel, if I could ask you to introduce yourselves, please. We'll go in A to Z order by surname. So, Jane Line, I'd like to start with you. Hello, Jane.
Hi, I'm Jane Line. I'm based in Singapore and lead the APAC Talent Mobility Ops team for Johnson & Johnson. Thank you for inviting me to join the panel today.
Oh, it's lovely to have you here. Thank you. And Eva, hello. You're speaking to us from Shanghai, aren't you? Hello.
Hello, everybody. My name is Eva. I am at Cargill, managing the regional total rewards team for our organization, including compensation benefits and global mobility. Thank you also for inviting me to join the panel.
You're very welcome. And Charlotte, hello. You're calling in from Canberra, I believe, government capital.
I am, yeah. So thanks, Claire. Thanks so much for having me. So I'm based in Canberra. I work for the Australian government, and I am the Global Talent Officer responsible for identifying and attracting talent into Australia from Europe and Israel.
Super. Thank you very much. Okay, so if we start with part one, we're going to look at why a strategy is important, and that's exactly what I want to ask, I think, Eva and Jane, first of all. Why do you think it's important for an organisation to have a distinct talent strategy? And also, how closely do you think this should be aligned with global mobility?
At J&J, global mobility actually sits within our global talent management team. So, we're very much aligned and work together. I think it's important that organisations must have a distinct talent strategy. It's essential for managing talent, both current talent and future talent. Having this strategy can give an organisation the competitive edge, providing it's aligned to business goals. And turning to mobility, I think that for most businesses, mobility is integral to their global growth and also for developing global leaders. And also it's on the agenda for more and more employees. They want to have a global experience as part of their career.
Yes, sure. Okay, thank you. And Eva?
Okay, I think at Cargill, our structure is a little bit different than what Jane has shared in J&J. Our global mobility is sitting as part of a total rewards organization. Unlike in J&J, you have the global mobility in the talent management department of HR. But I think the importance of having a distinct talent strategy is very important to all the organizations if the organizations would like to be successful in the industries, in the geographies they compete with the others to achieve their business objectives. And global mobility, as we are still structurally wise, we are not part of the talent management, but we started to work very closely with the talent management department, as we believe global mobility is a key enabler to achieve and fulfill our talent commitments that category has for our people to advance the growth of our businesses and expansion of our geographic strategy.
Sure.
To achieve our strategy.
Yes, thank you. And I want to ask you more about that in a little while, because I know you have been doing a lot of work on that, and I think it's interesting to hear how the business sees this. But Charlotte, if I can come to you now, because obviously you're coming from a slightly different perspective, working for the Australian government. You're looking for new talent to bring it from Europe and Israel, I believe, but also I think the government is targeting other regions too, obviously. Can you just tell us a bit more about it and what kind of organisations you're working with? You know, how does this fit in with global mobility?
Yeah, of course. As I mentioned just before, I work with the Global Talent Program. It's a fairly new initiative for the Australian government. It was launched in November last year. So at its heart, it's a visa program. It offers a streamlined pathway to permanent residence for highly skilled and talented entrepreneurs, innovators, academics, professionals. So really the people that are working at the top of their field. So it was the program was developed to address gaps within our current migration programs, but it's really about acknowledging that we need to be more competitive as a country when it comes to talent attraction. So there are a lot of other countries who have, government-led talent attraction programs, but Australia is one of the only countries that's developed it as a pathway to permanent residence straight away. So why I think that's really great is that it offers security for an individual or a family who want to move, but it also offers flexibility. So you can come and go as often as you need to if you have business interests elsewhere. I mean, obviously that's a little bit limited at the moment, but I think generally that's a really sort of key thing that people look for. So yeah, we're really looking for those people that are at the top of their fields, and I think the real aim is to make those people more globally mobile. So we want them to come to Australia, not necessarily for the rest of their lives, but we want them to come here to assist in resolving global challenges, start or expand a business, employ and transfer skills to Australians, or contribute to an innovative company in Australia. So it's not designed to take over our local workforce. It's really about augmenting our local workforce and promoting that transfer of skills and knowledge so that we can build up local talent and local ecosystems. So yeah, I guess my role in that whole sort of program is to work with organisations like the Forum for Expatriate Management, working with industry bodies, universities, actors in startup ecosystems to really promote what Australia has to offer, what the opportunities are here, and hopefully identify and attract some really great people into the country. So it's not just Europe and Israel, which is what I look after, but we have people looking after the whole of the globe.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. I think that's interesting what you say also about people coming and going and so on. It sort of ties in with the fact that so many people now have a kind of portfolio career, don't they? So they're not always just focused on one thing, and particularly perhaps if they're, they might be brought in in a consultancy role or something within a company. That I think that perhaps feeds into the global mobility process. Okay, so Jane, I know obviously you're at Johnson & Johnson at the moment, but you've had a range of roles or senior roles at lots of major multinationals, and you've lived and worked in Asia Pacific for 10, 15 years, I think. So you've sort of got the experience as an expat yourself. How do you think the talent landscape has changed in that time, and what do you think are the important elements to include, given the current climate too?
Sure, yes. I've lived in Japan, Singapore, and the UK during my career, and I've been fortunate to work in mobility functions in FMCGs, both in EMEA and APAC, consulting, advertising, tech, and now healthcare. I actually started my career in Singapore, mobility career in Singapore in 2001. And at that time, we typically saw a lot of west to east type of international assignments. They were mainly coming from the US. Big US multinationals were sending their leaders over to, well, all over the world. and people would be coming on the traditional expat package. These assignments were based around the traditional family structure and would include housing, schooling allowances, with all the bells and whistles. Things have changed a lot since then, and now we see many different approaches dependent on the organisation and also their business strategy. And this, of course, is also influenced by industry trends as well. Often you hear one company is rolling out a particular kind of policy and it's been very successful. So a lot of other companies like to try to jump on the bandwagon, but whether it actually works for their specific company would really depend on their overarching principles with regards to how they develop their talent and also how they reward and develop people.
Yes, that's a very good point. I think it's certainly not a one-size-fits-all, and I think it's interesting that Eva's already highlighted the fact that their approach is slightly different to yours. Of course, it all depends on your sector and your business goals and so on. Eva, we're going to move into the sort of second part of this conversation now, talking about, what are the particular challenges and how we strengthen the talent pool. Let's start, if I may, with finding out a bit more about why Cargill has recently focused on aligning global mobility and talent. Can you just give us an outline of why this came about?
Sure, I would be more than happy to do so. To give a bit background on why it becomes such a big topic at Cargill, as we are putting the resources together to work out the strategy and the plan for our talents, especially for these talented people in Asia. I think at Cargill we have a lot of similar challenges, as Jane has shared in the mobility area of these multinational organizations. For many, many years, we have a lot of inbound expats into Asia, taking senior executive positions and leading the businesses, even functions for this region in Asia. And these people could be sent to Asia from our headquarter location, which is the US, and they could be also assigned to Asia from EMEA region, as Cargill started our investment in EMEA after it was founded in the US. So it could be because of the reason we have more global talents in the US and in the EMEA region. So today we have a lot of inbound assignees, expats from the non-Asian regions into Asia, holding executive positions. And that has become a challenge that Cargill reflect, as we want to really promote and create opportunities for the talented people in Asia to gain the global exposure and to be ready to take up the positions that are hosted today by these expat talents from the other regions. So this is one of the important triggers. It becomes such an important initiative at Cargill. We are looking into the revisiting of our talent strategy by leveraging our global mobility offerings and programs. And also cost becomes another challenge for us, as we usually provide these traditional benefits to expats, long-term assignees, not only to them, but also to their family members. Yeah. And in the recent environment with our ever-changing world, I think all the companies are evaluating the efficiency of their programs together with their business strategies and the talent commitments.
Yes. Okay, thank you. I mean, you mentioned their executive talent. We're talking especially about senior talent, presumably.
At Cargill, I think senior talent is certainly one of our focused groups of the talent, as we want to have our Asian people leading the businesses, overseeing the growth of Cargill at this region, and we believe they deserve this opportunity. But also, there are other groups we want to provide them with meaningful experiences through our global mobility programs. For example, some female leaders and the next generation talents, we also would like to customize some of the programs in our new strategy to accelerate their growth of these segments of talents.
Yes. Okay. All right. Well, I'd like to come back to the question of female talent and diversity a little more later. But can I just sort of clarify a couple of other things? Because I know when we spoke previously, I think you said that because talent was previously imported, often you didn't have, once an assignment was over, you didn't have someone in place ready to take over necessarily. So maybe assignments went on for longer than had previously been planned, or there were, I guess you needed more succession planning. Is that right? Have I understood that correctly?
Yeah, I just forgot to also mention from that perspective, another challenge is we have to extend the assignments for these talents and expats from the other regions into Asia, because at the end of their planned assignment, we have no successor ready to take up their positions, or we do have some people, but who have a gap in their experience or in their skills. So
Right.
it caused a sequence that we had to, in the past, we had to extend the assignment of these non-Asian talents again for many years, and keeping them beyond a expat arrangement.
Yes.
And we realized this is a issue, and we want to address this and give it a solution to be doing a better job and do it differently on our succession planning.
Yes, sure. Okay. All right. Can I pick up on the point about opportunities and so on, and developing that talent? What other factors play a part in the challenges? Is it immigration regulations? Is it difficulties in moving people from particular locations, perhaps different salary brackets, and cost of living expectations? What else is feeding into this? This is a question for all of you. Jane, would you like to go?
I mean, talking generally, it really depends. If we're just talking about assignments, then obviously cost plays a big part, and the business as well. The type of business would also play a part. I mean, in consultancies, we see people going on projects, assignments, and often these assignments are 6 weeks to 1 year, or sometimes even longer. And the type of benefits and policies which would be provided would be completely different. And in tech, we see a lot of external hire one-way moves, and in some ways it's a lot easier to get people to move because often we see that these candidates are younger. They don't have family, and they're more junior in their career, so they're happy to move for less in order to gain an international experience. For other companies where they're more nurturing, and like FMCG, or even and J&J as well, sometimes people will develop their whole career within a particular company, and then there is the need for those assignments, because that's some of it's the expectation from the employee, and obviously if they're going to be spending their career within the company, then there's a need to retain them and maybe move them around into various global roles. So we do experience that it really depends on the category of employee and the business that they're working for, whether they're going to come into the region or not, and whether they're going to move around the region, whether the business can afford it.
Yes, because Singapore is very different, isn't it? Low tax, high salary to perhaps another country nearby.
Yes, and I mean, what I've seen is that there are some countries that are huge exporters of talent. Their employees are typically very willing to relocate to other countries, whereas there are some countries, for example, let's say Japan. It's harder to get employees to leave Japan, and I don't know whether that's sometimes to do with language barriers, or worry about standard of living, also worry about coming back to Japan and slotting back into the education system for assignees with families. So I think there are lots of different factors at play as to why people don't move. I mean, COVID aside.
Yes, and Eva touched on something earlier about families. Family, the definition of a family can vary from culture to culture, can't it?
Yes, definitely. I mean, most assignment policies tend to be based around, I guess, the traditional family, male assignees with a trailing spouse and children. But these days, obviously there are more than one type of family. So I think businesses really need to look at, redesigning their policies to reflect this. For example, single parents, or, assignees who want to travel with a parent instead of their spouse, depending on whether there's childcare available. And a lot of Asian families live with their extended family. And currently, policies that are developed out of the US or out of Europe don't accommodate this type of situation.
Yes. Okay. All right. But would anyone else like to comment on that point before we move on? I'd like to talk a little bit about diversity, actually.
I just wanted to quickly mention, in terms of, I guess, challenges or blockers that we have seen. In Australia, the government did a lot of consultation with industry before we developed the Global Talent Program. And one of the main sort of blockers, I guess, that they found in bringing talent into the country was visas. And I don't know about other countries. I know it's probably a little bit the same, that our visa framework is quite complex, and it can be hard to navigate for especially smaller companies who don't necessarily have like an inbuilt sort of immigration function or a support function like that. So we're really hoping that with this program, making it a bit more streamlined will remove some of those barriers so that we can bring more talent in and assist industry in that way.
All right, thank you. Okay, so if I can move on a little to diversity, what are your goals in relation to women leaders? Eva, I think when we spoke before, you mentioned you actually do have a sort of target. Is that right?
Correct. I would say at Cargill we have a very aggressive target to achieve full gender equity after 10 years. So by 2030, we want to have 50% of the women leaders globally. So we are still having a distance to that goal. But I think we have the strong sponsorship and support from the top of the house at Cargill, and we really would like to drive towards that goal through a variety of our programs, including global mobility.
Right. Okay, thank you. And actually that brings me on nicely, because I wanted to ask you for a bit more detail about how you're embedding this talent strategy within your company. And you mentioned the sort of sponsorship from the senior leaders. Can you tell us a bit more about how you're doing it?
Certainly, I think this is the very important success factor for us. And I am happy we took a very smart approach this time to address these challenges we have been facing for many years at Cargill. We have been struggling with developing our talents from Asia. But on the other hand, we also needed to have a well-planned succession planning for our existing expats who are also talented people from the other regions. We were working in silos in the past. It was because of our structure. So global mobility is not part of the talent management at Cargill. And it is still not part of the talent management. But we realized the importance of integrating talent and the total rewards programs. And global mobility is part of the total rewards programs we define at Cargill. So we started last year by approaching our senior leaders. All of them are the most senior business leaders and the function leaders. So we had conversations with them. We brought them with our insights. We let them know what are the challenges, what we can do, and what are our recommendations. It was not easy. We hosted a number of conversations. We collected the feedback from different angles, from different perspectives, and finally we got the support from our executive team. Then we formed a project team authorized by the executive team to work out a plan to really carry out the strategy for our Asian talent. So this was where we started, and we are still in the progress of moving this forward to achieve our set goals.
Yes. Okay. I think that the point you make about getting that sponsorship, getting the stakeholders on board, basically, is really significant. I know, we've spoken previously in other events and our America Summit to Tanya Mariottini, who's now at Expedia, and she's again a sort of talent specialist, very experienced in that area, and she gave a masterclass on this about how to integrate your talent strategy and global mobility. And one of the key points that she had was get your key stakeholders on board and get them behind the project and get them driving it through. So, Jane, can you tell me a bit about some of the things that have been going on maybe at J&J, or that you've just observed in the global mobility community as a whole? So, every business moves have been impacted by the pandemic. And I think you particularly focus on the operational side of the talent management. What are particular challenges that you're seeing, and how can you find a way to work around them?
Sure. I mean, I can share that at J&J, we're quite fortunate in that we have a multi-talented mobility function. We've got over 20 specialists working in our team. Wow. As you know, mobility is currently limited globally, but in APAC and EMEA, we've started to see some moves taking place as the restrictions start to lift. Talking about our team, we have our leadership team, tax and immigration COEs, global operations strategy, and also advisory to support. And when COVID hit earlier this year, we very quickly mobilized and formed a COVID squad, including key members from our teams. We had daily stand-ups, and we were quickly able to put together some operational guidelines to support those employees who were stranded in the middle of their moves. And these guidelines addressed issues such as compensation, promotion, corporate tax, health coverage, flexible work arrangements, immigration changes. I mean, really everything that was coming up. I know many companies are offering temporary remote working options at the moment, including J&J, where relocation isn't possible. The way we've approached it at J&J, rather than saying don't move or work from home or work from this location, we're actually looking at each case by case. And at J&J, we base all our decisions on our credo. So we're putting the health and safety of our employees and their families first. And the things that we're looking at in particular are employee immigration compliance. Can they actually work remotely, or can they move? The employees' comfort level, to move, and also the willingness of their family. Can social distancing restrictions be followed if they do move? And also the availability of relocation services, logistics, including flights, temporary housing, because in some locations it's not possible to get those services at the moment. So it's not possible to relocate. So it really is a case by case basis, putting the employee at the heart of that.
Yes, but then presumably in the midst of all that, you've got to keep that sort of flow of talent continuous. You don't want that to put that on pause, do you?
Yes, and I mean we haven't done that. We've had people where they can starting remotely, or we've got people waiting to come in to their new location when they can. I know that our TA team are still busy, still. So things are definitely going on. It's just that in some cases where immigration or flights, logistical aspects are limiting movement, then we're having to put these things on hold until we can move ahead more smoothly.
Sure. Okay. All right.
Can I build something on that? Because I think what Jane has shared is very similar to what Cargill has been doing to battle the global crisis. So we also have experienced the challenges to move the people around during this period, as there are so many borders are closed and the travels are restricted. And one of the core values at Cargill is putting our people first. So guided by this value, we have also come up with some temporary policies. We are very fast in revisiting our remote worker guidelines to provide the employees with the tools, resources, and the support as they are forced to working from a home location, or they are not able to return to the office. We also have worked out some other guidelines around returning to the offices safely, and global travel guidelines are updated very regularly. And within global mobility, we also have a very similar approach. We identified several key stakeholders, including Cargill regional representatives, global COE policy manager, as well as our relocation and immigration partners. We meet every week to review the major updates and individual unique cases every week. So we share with each other our insights, our updates to ensure we have all the information, as our businesses are still wanting to move the people. So they reached out to us very often. They are eager to know when they can move the people to our strategic locations to facilitate the development of the talents as well as the growth of our business. So it's something I really would like to share what we are doing at Cargill.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eva. Okay. Before we go on to part 3, I just want to come to Charlotte. Can you tell us a bit more about the program and the specific sectors and skills that you're targeting? Because I think this is one of the things that we haven't really touched on very much. What are the key skills that are going to be needed, in the next 12 months and beyond? Are these relatively new industries in Australia? Is that one of the reasons you don't have enough people of working age with those skills in the country? Or is it that you want people to bring in new perspectives, that global experience? Is that one of the reasons that you're doing this? Is it is it an aging population issue? What are the factors feeding into this?
Yeah, thank you for the question. As I briefly mentioned before, and I think Eva was talking about as well, when we were first developing the Global Talent Program, we really wanted to work with industry to get that buy-in early on, because, as a bureaucrat, as part of the government, I'm not necessarily in the best place to identify what skill sets we need and what sectors we really need to build up in the country. So we worked really collaboratively with key stakeholders in industry to make sure that the locations we were targeting, the skill sets we were targeting, were either building up sectors that we were already leading in, or were building up sectors that we wanted to lead in going forward. So after the consultation, we came up with 7 target sectors. I hope I remember them all. So they are cybersecurity, medical technology, agricultural technology, space and advanced manufacturing, financial technologies, energy and mining tech, and quantum information, advanced digital, data science, and ICT. So they kind of cover a broad range of areas, but that group of sort of 7 sectors is kind of a balance of sectors that we have a pretty solid reputation in. So things like agricultural technology, med tech, mining, they're things that Australia is well known for across the world. But then others, our ecosystems are fairly new. So through the program, we're really looking at building those up, augmenting our local talent and bringing in the skills that we need. So I'll give you a couple of quick examples. So fintech and space are probably the 2 key ones that we're really focused on. So you'd probably be aware that we actually recently developed our own, established our own space agency here in South Australia. So we really want to build up the expertise in that sector, and we're going to have to obviously bring in outside talent to share knowledge and experience and expertise and new perspectives with local talent. And so I was really excited that one of the first people that I identified through the program in Europe was actually a female startup founder who was recently granted a visa through the program. She specialises in recruitment, consulting and training in the space sector, and is coming over to Australia to set up or expand that startup. So she'll pretty soon be employing Australians and really building that ecosystem here. Likewise, as I said, fintech's probably the other key example. And I mean, everyone here would be aware, you know, Australia is a few years behind sort of fintech hubs like London. But I think that really offers opportunities because the market's not saturated. There's lots of sort of avenues for people to come in and fill gaps. And I think I was mentioning in our last meeting as well that Australians really are known for picking up, especially financial technologies, a lot more readily than some other markets. So I think there's some great opportunities here. And I actually also identified a man from the UK who wanted to come to Australia. He's a serial entrepreneur, and he wanted to move to Australia to start a product disruptive neobank in Queensland. So he's here, he's set up the company, he's got his financial license, and he actually wouldn't have been eligible for permanent residence before the Global Talent Program because of his age, and he's only 47. Which is still very young. So that's another great thing about the program is that we're kind of expanding that that concept of what individuals we want to come into the country, who can contribute, what skills are we looking for. So yeah, I guess coming to your point about, you know, skills, perspectives, experiences, we want all those new things coming into Australia to really sort of diversify the ecosystems that we currently have. And I guess that's something I love about the program as well, as it's so proactive. Like I'm here talking today, I go out with my colleagues and we promote the program, whereas I think in the past and with lots of other countries' visa programs, they're very passive. So, you know, you sit back, you wait for someone to apply, you grant them a visa, they come to us. Whereas this is very much about going, you know, these are the areas we want to lead in, these are the skills we need. We are going to proactively come and talk to you, hopefully convince you to move to Australia, and that way we get the people, the skill sets, the knowledge, the businesses that we really need in Australia going forward.
Yes, and presumably it's quite a departure, really, because the impression I think in the UK certainly we've always got is that, you know, you've got to have a job it's already set up for you in Australia if you're going to go there, and you know, for companies as well, they've got to have an entity there and so on. This is very different, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very different. So, and as I was saying before, the visa system or the visa framework has been a blocker for people in the past, because you're right when you say you need to have a job to get a visa, but then sometimes you need to have a visa to get the job. So it's, you know, people just end up looking elsewhere. And so this is really about saying, you know, if you have the right skill set, if you can bring what we're looking for, you don't need to have that job. We know you're going to get here and you're going to be able to contribute. So making it more streamlined for those sort of top of your field individuals.
Just a sort of final word on the expat model. You know, is that a dodo now, or is it still relevant? What's the future in APAC, do you think? Jane, I'm going to come to you again first, if I may.
I guess it's too early to say really whether the balance is shifting at this stage. Organisations still have the need to develop global leaders, or some organisations do, and in order to have success in their global business, international assignments or relocations are going to go ahead. And if they don't go ahead, I imagine that they'll be postponed until restrictions have lifted, and then the business will attempt to push them forward again. I think COVID will change how we think about things in the future. And in the current state, with all the immigration restrictions, then employees will have to think really carefully and evaluate whether a global experience is right for them and their family at this time. In the sense that, if you go somewhere at the moment, policies can change whilst you're there, and it could mean that you can't actually go home for the foreseeable future. So that's not going to be right for everyone. Gaining a global experience is still very high on the list for a lot of employees. And so I think I'm very optimistic that we'll see the flow of talent coming into APAC, out of APAC, and around APAC in the future.
Super. Okay, thank you. Eva.
So I'm also very positive about the future of the global mobility, how important the role it could play in the talent strategy, as well as the future it would be brighter for our Asian people. We have done a lot of surveys at Cargill to assess what are our general service levels to our assignees and to our families. And through all of these surveys, our employees told us they really welcome the global mobility programs, the opportunities, the experience they can gain, and the skills, new skills, and the cultural exposure they and their families could get from the international assignment opportunities, not only from a working perspective, but also from a life viewpoint. They very much appreciate the global mobility programs. From a policy point of view, I think we certainly needed to make some changes given these developments in the market and we have experienced during the crisis, which has given some insights to us on the future direction of global mobility strategy and programs. We are hearing more and more on the need of creating some official guidelines to promote the virtual assignment opportunity and to further revisit our remote work arrangement, as our ultimate goal is to fulfill our talent commitments, including an Asian talent strategy. We really would like to have more Asian talents take up significant positions and bigger roles and responsibilities in this region, leading the businesses and our functions. So I would say I'm very optimistic as well and positive for the future of global mobility programs and our Asian talents and people.
Great, thank you very much. Charlotte, brief word from you.
Yeah, I would just echo what Jane and Eva have said. I'm super optimistic about the future of talent and global mobility in the region, particularly in Australia. I think that again, I keep saying this, but what I love about this program, why I love working on it, is that it's really about making people more mobile, making them able to move around our region in particular and share their knowledge, share their skills and expertise and experience, and make people those global leaders so that they can sort of contribute to solving these global challenges we're all facing, including the current crisis. So I'm very optimistic, and in terms of the expat model, again, I would echo what Jane said, that I don't think you can quite comment yet on whether the balance has shifted, but I am definitely optimistic in terms of where things are heading.
Great. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, panel. That was really, really interesting. And I think that's certainly set the scene for our summit. You've touched on so many elements that we will be exploring further, virtual assignments and, policy changes and all sorts of things, practical measures. That was great. Thank you very much for all your expertise and taking the time to do this. Many thanks again to the panel there for all their insights. We'll see you again soon for an expert insight interview with Javier Maldonado of HSBC, but now we have a very short break. Welcome back. So with its global reach and overview, HSBC has actually been very well placed to provide banking support to corporations and assignees throughout this pandemic. And during lockdown, or with employees sometimes it's stuck in third locations, the need for digital solutions has been even more acute. Join me now as I speak to Javier about some of the ways in which global banking can support the mobility process.
Expert Insight Interview, the future of banking for international assignees. Javier Maldonado, HSBC Group International and Employee Banking Solutions Senior Manager, is speaking to Claire Tennant-Skull, Global Director of Content and Events, FEM.
Right, hello and welcome to this Expert Insight interview. My name's Claire Tennant-Skull. I'm the Global Director of Content and Events here at FEM, and I'm delighted to have this opportunity to speak to Javier Maldonado from HSBC. He's the Senior International Coverage Manager for Group International, EBS and HSBC. He's based in Hong Kong, I believe, and I'll ask him to introduce himself properly in just a moment. So, Javier, I'm going to ask you in a minute to tell us a little bit more about yourself, but before we begin our discussion properly, I'd just like to give a brief outline of how we're going to frame this. So, in the current environment, banking, I think, has become a higher priority in terms of international moves. The limitations on global movement and some of the sort of government regulations, I think, have made it have expedited the need for digital solutions to these things, because as we know, people can't necessarily go in branch to open an account and so on. And with all the kind of delays and the complexities that have been involved in the last few months for global mobility professionals moving assignees around the world, that they are very keen to have their assignees hit the ground running, as it were, as soon as they're able to get back into the office or to manufacturing sites and so on. So I think we'll start by looking at some of the sort of overarching topics that we'll be looking at. And if you can just tell us a little bit more to start with about your role, HSBC itself, and how this all fits in with global mobility.
Thank you, Claire, and thank you so much for having me. So I think, so first myself. So I've been an expert myself for over 10 years. I've relocated first as a young couple with my wife and now with children. So I know all the adventures that come with an international movement. And I'm actually delighted to look after our international corporate executives within HSBC. As you know, HSBC is one of the largest banking and financial services organizations globally, and we serve over 40 million customers worldwide across 64 countries and territories. So our customer ranges from just individual savers, investors, to some of the world's biggest companies, governments, and international organizations. So one of the things that we aim is to actually to connect them to opportunities and actually help them fulfill their ambitions. All these through actually building long-lasting relationships. So global mobility is definitely plays a very important role in that.
Yes, and often, in other discussions I've heard about, there's a sort of chain to these things. So if someone is being relocated, they have to have a leasing agreement to show, or they have to have a bank account, or they have to have things in place to make the dominoes fall in the right order. I believe, is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when people relocate and move into a new market, they look different. Right? Suddenly you go walk into any place. Oh, okay. So where's your address? Well, what do you mean? Where's my address? I just moved in. Oh, where's your credit history? Oh, well, actually, I'm just new to the market. I don't have that. So it's very important to acknowledge and both to help support and get the international assignees familiarized with that journey in terms of that they will be seen as a different, because they are different, right? It's almost like a newborn baby, day one
Yes.
in a different country.
Yes.
It's very important to make sure that we support them and help them through this relocation.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about how you're actually supporting the global mobility teams and the professionals who are, organizing these moves, and how that also informs their longer term strategy.
Yeah, from a HSBC perspective, and as I mentioned, we have a very wide geographical reach, right? And therefore, we have a unique opportunity to help our corporate clients and also their international assignees in both sides of the corridor, right? Their home and their new destination. And
Yes.
and this is also because, we also firmly believe that when an international assignee moves into a new territory and experience a new culture, actually this is helping them grow. This is helping them grow professionally, personally, and also from a corporate perspective. And these corporates that have global mobility programs, they're doing this because they want to help their business grow and expand internationally. And,
Yeah.
and we are here to support them. We're here to help them achieve those ambitions. I think now with the context changing significantly, there's a different way of operating, right? And for us is very important. And in this case, I'll give an example from our colleagues in Singapore. For example, they work very closely with our HR teams in our from our corporate clients and the relocation firms to make sure that through our digital platforms and digital solutions, we make this process as simple as possible for the corporate and their assignees. So that's how we are aiming to help. And as I said, beyond Singapore, in Asia Pacific and worldwide, we're aiming to drive that support and service.
Yes. Okay. I think also you touched on something in the previous question about credit history, establishing credit history, and so on, and the fact that you have this global reach. I mean, there's been a very effective promotional campaign in the UK here about HSBC and the sort of multinational DNA that it has. So having that kind of continuity again is also very important, isn't it? Being able for corporate teams too to know that they can deal with a sort of consistent policy all the way through.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you mentioned, obviously HSBC is no different, right? So we know policies and the way firms operate are different from country to country, right? And HSBC is no exception. However, we aim to provide that consistency and support as part of the relocation, right? And also to help them connect their new destination and connect them back home. Because
Yes.
as you know, when you move, it's not that you left everything behind, right? So more often than not, you still have financial commitments. And you need to serve those. So it's important to make it easy for them so that they can focus on other things that are more important for the assignees.
Yes, and presumably for the corporates, it's also about organising the payroll and the tax reporting and all that sort of thing. It helps too if you've got that consistent spread. Okay, so taking into consideration the current economical and the physical environment, what are the sort of the banking implications? What are the key points for mobility, do you think?
So I think we need to look back probably just, let's say, last year or the year before. Banking has been part of the mobility, right? It's always there at the center of a mobility journey. But as you know, probably tax and immigration will take precedence, and you will have the corporates and some of the relocation partners looking after that. And then you have the rest around the physical relocation and schooling, accommodation, and so on. And banking was somewhere in there, right? So you would normally see that first-time movers will probably leave banking towards the end, basically when they arrive or just before they are leaving, to say, okay, actually, I need to get this sorted. Whilst on the other hand, you would see that more seasoned expats or serial expat would know that this is important, would know that they actually need to get this done in order to make their transition for them and their families a little bit easier, and also to enable their corporates and their payroll teams to process payments, etc. So you have these two different kind of like types or behaviors. Yeah. I think in the current environment, it's been very obvious that due to the travel restrictions, and also because some assignees are starting their international assignments at home, which means you're at home, but you're working for another country, they need that service to get their banking done remotely and digitally. Yeah. And also there's another element that even when they're able to move, they land into a country and then it's highly likely they need to serve quarantine or follow local regulations in terms of the whatever pandemic restrictions are in place, which means they may actually need to wait for another 2 weeks before they're able to visit a branch or communicate with someone. So that just creates, or it's bumping banking a little bit up the list in terms of priorities. So actually, let's solve this as soon as possible so that we can enable our families, schooling, getting that kind of like deposit for accommodation, etc., and also enable the payroll teams to avoid, let's say, international payments. So this is something that is happening, and is now being very obvious in terms of it's a lot more important. You need to solve for it.
Yes, sure, and also I think another, it's perhaps a rather obvious point, but you know, the digital solutions are so much more important now because of the different time zones. You know, most people now are working across all sorts of time zones, and particularly if you're being moved, you've still got to communicate with perhaps your other office, you know, back in your home country and so on. So having those digital solutions in place is more important than ever, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we're aiming is we basically want our customers and the international assignees to have their bank in their pocket, right? And not only their domestic bank, but they need to have that global view of their finances, just opening the app and say, okay, well, this is the global view of my banking in my pocket anytime, 24/7. So that is a very clear distinction, and it makes a difference.
Yes, sure. Yes, and of course, some people have quite complex financial arrangements too, don't they? So again, it's that access.
Yeah, I mean, the moment you move countries, your banking becomes more interesting. Let's put it that way. And at the end of the day, that's our job, and that's why our teams are fully focused in terms of helping both the corporates and their employees, both international and domestic, to make that as easy as possible.
Sure. Okay. So tell us a bit more about the interaction between HSBC and the corporates, you know, your corporate clients who are managing global mobility programs. You mentioned Singapore earlier. Can you give us some more examples?
Yeah, of course. So basically what normally happens, and our colleagues in Singapore are doing a great job, it's basically our corporate account managers will work hand in hand with our corporate clients to provide the necessary support, right? And this is in terms of the wide range of needs, including global mobility. But this could be from financial well-being clinics or seminars, but also in terms of our products and services available. And one of the key elements, more from a mobility perspective, is actually to help their employees as they actually move, let's say, into country, to set up those banking facilities before they arrive. And some of the mechanisms that we're using to enable this is basically electronic signature, so that they can actually electronically sign and submit documents securely to the bank.
Right.
So, and this is obviously all processed online, but whilst this is being processed online, there's also the support from our team to guide them through this journey and through this experience. So that's basically how we are working on a regular basis with our corporate clients.
Okay. And what about, you mentioned employee engagement, well-being strategies and financial well-being strategies and so on. Does that presumably that includes some financial planning and so on? Because again, the world is very uncertain at the moment, and I guess when you move, one of the big questions is, what happens when I return home or move on to another assignment?
Yeah, I mean, this is very important, right? Also, as you mentioned, and it happens a lot when they move to another assignment. We also need to help them, right? So you've been in an assignment, then you move again. You're serial experts. What are the solutions? What is the best way to manage your finances? Home, remotely, do you need a central location to manage your money globally? And also welcome people back, right? So when they come back, we need to make sure that we're there for them, because in my case, I've been outside of my home country for over 10 years. When you go back, it's a different place, right? And things have moved. So we are also looking at the end-to-end spectrum around not only when they relocate for the first time, but how do we serve these serial expats? What are the centers that we have to provide them with a central location to manage their finances, either being in Asia Pacific or Europe and Western markets. And then more on the domestic piece, what we're doing, as I mentioned earlier, is to make sure that we provide them with financial well-being clinics, which is more around, okay, what are the things in terms, how can you make the most of your banking without getting into any specific products and services, but okay, this is how you could think about making the most, and this is for all the employee base of our corporate clients.
How do you deliver those? Are they over the internet, or how are they actually?
Well, traditionally, it would be like really nice events done at the corporate's premises. This is old-fashioned kind of good events. But now we're doing those events virtually, and the teams are actually having this, and there's kind of like response toolkits available to say, okay, we know things are happening. We know these are uncertain times, but this is kind of how you can make the most of your banking.
Yes. Okay. All right. Thank you. Yes. Well, let's hope they're not too traditional. Let's hope those things come back very soon. But overall, let's just sort of finish by talking about some of the experience of your clients. So, HR managers, are they engaging with you on this? Do you think that the message is getting across?
So there's definitely a lot of engagement with HR managers, but I think because, as I mentioned earlier, this was not a priority or not seen as a high priority item before. I think there is a lack of awareness in terms of those capabilities to open accounts remotely. So, and when they find out that account opening remotely before arrival, and how this can actually make a big difference in terms of the assignee experience, generally HR managers are delighted. They really like online digital solutions and remote solutions when the employee can actually open the account remotely. Yes. So I think this is just very well received. I think other good feedback that we get is basically from payroll teams, right? Because the fact that the employee is able to have a domestic account, that removes the complexity for them to actually need to go through multiple approvals to process employee payrolls for employees that are not physically in country, and then probably involve cross-border transactions. So that just makes easier for the corporate in terms of managing their new international assignees. as they land. And then, as you know, within the overall global mobility ecosystem, we also work hand in hand with relocation firms and destination service providers, because at the end of the day, they are looking after the assignee in that through that journey, right? So then we also work with them to make sure that they know about these solutions that we can offer to their clients, and if at the end of the day that makes their clients happier, they also like to provide a good service to them. So it's a win-win for them and for us.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Javier. It's really good to get an insight into these things, and let's hope that we can return to some of those more traditional meetings as well. But I think, we'll keep what I'm hearing from a lot of the mobility professionals and the service provider partners I'm speaking to over the course of this summit is that, a lot of the things that we've learned during this, some of the digital solutions and so on, those will carry forward no matter what the situation is in the future, even if we return to what we now think of as normality, being able to meet face to face. Do you think that's the case with HSBC? You've learned some things out of this too?
Absolutely. I mean, to be honest, one thing that is not changing is that we love to help our customers, and we love when they walk into our branches or when we connect with them at their premises. But right now we're connecting through them digitally, through digital clinics, and also through remote account opening journeys. So we're delighted, and it's, I think, quite evident that some of these things are here to stay, and we will continue to help them through their international journey. So that is not changing for sure.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much again, Javier. Very good to see you, and take care.
Thank you so much, Claire. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Many thanks again to Javier. I think in the past 6 months or so, we've all recognised anew the benefits of really good forward planning. So now we move on to the topic of virtual assignments, something that I know many organisations have been utilising during the current situation, but which may not seem quite as straightforward as at first glance, and again, require some careful planning. So I'm delighted to be speaking with Fred Schloman of Air Inc.
Expert Insight Interview, Virtual Assignments, an emerging approach to mobility. Fred Schloman, Vice President, Air Inc. Asia Pacific Limited, is speaking to Claire Tennant-Skull, Global Director of Content and Events, FEM.
Right, hello and welcome to this Expert Insight interview with Fred Schloman, who is Vice President at Air Inc. Asia Pacific, and me, Claire Tennant-Skull. I'm the Global Director for Content and Events at FEM. I'm delighted to have Fred with us today, and we're going to be discussing virtual assignments. This is a term that we've heard more frequently lately in our webinars and the 2 summits that we've done online now. And of course, it's an evolving form of mobility that's really come to the fore during the COVID-19 pandemic. It solves some problems, obviously, but it's not quite as simple as it may seem. So I'm keen to find out more. Fred, before our first question, can I just ask you to introduce yourself? Well, you need no introduction really, but just tell everyone a bit about yourself.
Absolutely. Thanks, Claire, and thanks for having me on today. I started in mobility back in the early 80s. So actually, I just realized this is my 40th year in mobility.
Wow.
So it's been pretty much a career for me. But most recently, I came out to Hong Kong in 2008 and opened up the Air Inc. office for Asia Pacific, and I've been leading the business here and working with clients in the region since that time. So but you're absolutely right. This is kind of a once in a lifetime event that we're going through, and the impact on mobility is absolutely significant.
Yes, absolutely. So, okay. So my first question really is connected to some of the research you've been doing, because I know you've done a couple of surveys now at Air Inc. I'm interested to know a bit more about the methodology. So, was it industry wide? Was it a global survey? Well, both of them, or more tightly focused? And also, obviously, more importantly, can you give us a sense of the responses you've got?
Yeah, that's of course what everybody wants to know, right? I guess I thought it would be important to add a little bit of context before we jump into the research and the results. Because since the onset of the pandemic, I think everybody would agree that remote working has really become or proven itself as quite successful. It used to be the employee had to go where the work was, right? You find a job and you eventually have to move to where the job was. Now that has been flipped around by the pandemic, and the work can actually go to the employee. That's possible for a number of reasons. Obviously, technology is key, but the concept of remote working arrangements and virtual assignments hinges on this capacity of the work to go to the employee, not the other way around. So with that context, we've been obviously engaging companies and surveying this issue since probably March. And this past April, we completed what I would call a relatively short pulse survey. And those were the early days of virtual assignments being discussed and even considered.
Right.
But now, as remote work has proven itself, the concept and the application of virtual assignments has become more mainstream and something that is pretty much on everybody's radar screen. So that's really the context. And let's jump to some of the results. We just completed it August 19th. We got responses from about 190 companies. These are global companies from all regions. Yeah, and from about 30 plus industry groups. So it's very broad based.
Sorry, how many industry groups did you say?
Over 30, yeah.
30, right, okay.
And so we're quite comfortable with the survey itself and the results based on that survey size. The one we did in April was similar size as well, about 180, right. A bit smaller. But the scope of that April survey was much smaller. This one was much broader in terms of the questions we asked and the information we collected. So it was an online survey, and as I said, we just wrapped it up August 19th. So the results that I'm sharing with you today are really hot off the press. We haven't released a formal document to our clients yet, so you're getting the inside peek on this one. So I think some of the key metrics that we got out of the survey was, first of all, that 65% of companies indicate that their global mobility programs are virtually on pause. And what that means is that no mobility is happening, certainly to the extent that it was pre-COVID. Things are now on pause, and companies are really in a holding pattern. There's still some ongoing from business trips and things of that sort. But if you think about your traditional types of assignments,
yes,
virtually all of those are on pause, which again is striking. Only 13% of these respondents think that global mobility activity will return next year to the same level as it was pre-COVID. So we're looking at a very striking picture of mobility in the next year or so, I think, which is also a challenging situation. And 50% of the respondents also indicated that they expect overall the impact of this pandemic will be to reduce mobility in general going forward. So we're looking at a very kind of, I would say, slow period in mobility over the next year and a half. So that's the overall trend. But regarding remote work arrangements specifically, 90% of companies that were in the survey indicated that they are considering or have done so and will be increasingly using remote work arrangements for global mobility. So that's a huge number. We asked them, what types of policies are you going to be using more frequently in the next year or so? And, the usual ones come up, short-term business commuter. But the one that was indicated to be the most commonly responded to were virtual assignments. So that's on the top of everybody's list. And so it's certainly something that companies feel will help them for a number of reasons, and that's part of what we're talking about today.
Do you think businesses really? Well, I'm not patronising the global mobility teams because they obviously understand what they mean. But do you think enough of the sort of stakeholders in businesses really understand what virtual assignments are about?
Well, I think you raise a really good point, which is that to deal with virtual assignments, first of all, you have to define them. What do they?
Yeah.
What does it mean, right?
Yeah.
And we've classified them under remote work arrangements, but where one of the countries or one of the work locations or the residence is different than the country in which the employee is actually residing. So it is, remote work arrangements have been around for a while, right? But mostly within a domestic sphere, right? But virtual really refers to the idea that you have an employee who is doing a job based in one location, but potentially living in another. And working in that other location to fulfill the job that is based. So Singapore, employees living in Singapore, but the job is in Dubai, right? So either the employee is at home or they go to the Singapore office if there is one, and they do the Dubai job from there. So that would be sort of a very loose definition of virtual assignments.
Yeah.
So when we talk about remote work arrangements, really we're talking about virtual assignments and involving two different countries and tax jurisdictions and immigration systems and all that. Of the respondents, 34% have implemented a remote work policy to cover assignments. This was a strikingly large number to me, given that in April, only 3% of the companies reported having a virtual assignments policy. So either we got a whole different set of companies in this survey, or which I think is more accurate, is that many companies have been working quite hard to get these things in place.
Yeah.
We're seeing now a third of companies really having some kind of virtual assignment option within their framework of mobility policies.
Yes, well, that certainly chimes with what I've heard talking to people on the webinars, and with the surveys that we've done, very sort of quick snap polls on those webinars. But a year ago, I don't think we heard the phrase virtual assignments.
No, it was primarily a domestic concern, right? I mean, my office is in Boston, but I have a house in Westminster or something, and can I work from home 2 days a week, right? That was sort of the other interesting aspect here is that commuter assignments, business travel, and short-term assignments are all expected to grow in volume in the next year or so. And part of that is the connection between virtual assignments and these other policies, right? In other words, you have somebody like our Singaporean working doing the job in Dubai. What if he needs to go to Dubai to resolve some issues with the team or with the particular work that he's doing? Yeah. It's not going to be a long-term assignment, right? Yeah. So we're seeing on the flip side of that, long-term assignments dropping in frequency and anticipated use as well. That's a trend that's been going on for years, but COVID really just has pushed that further down the road.
Yeah. Okay.
Just two more key points on this one. That why are we seeing virtual assignments? Two key drivers that came out of the survey. One was the desire to offer the businesses more flexibility in this dynamic environment. Things are changing quickly. Businesses need more options. Virtual assignments fills one of those needs quite well. The other interesting aspect is that cost savings are a key priority for many companies right now, with the economies around the world being really hard. Virtual assignments have a low-cost footprint, so it fulfills two key buckets for the business, and I think that's why we're seeing virtual assignments growing.
Yes, sure. Thank you. Can you tell me a bit more about what you're hearing from your clients directly too? Does that back up what your survey has shown?
Yes. I think what we did a number of roundtables and webinars early on in March and April, and the thing that struck me was the sort of the ad hoc nature of the decision making that was going on to deal with all these issues that were coming up as a result of the virus pandemic. So companies weren't spending a lot of time at that point really pondering what's the best policy approach. Things have settled down. Companies are now stepping back and trying to assess how do they do things better. And this is why they're able to now deal with the policy structures and coming up with a systematic way of dealing with virtual assignments. Before it was really ad hoc. Now companies are saying, gee, we really need this, and how do we do it in a way that makes the most sense? It as I mentioned earlier, it really does resolve the issue around handling mobility in this type of environment. I mean, just to give you an example, one of the companies that I spoke to had a situation where they got a call from an employee who had been in Beijing, and the employee said, "Well, I'm calling from Singapore. My family's safe. We're all in the hotel. Just wanted to let you know." And they were like, "What?" And that triggered a whole series of issues around tax and immigration and work permits, and, all of which they had not been aware of, right? And so this ad hoc situation led them to then see how they could begin to define this process better.
Right. Okay.
But it really was an ad hoc situation, and it's the whole concept of if you're trying to drain the swamp but you keep getting bitten by alligators, you can't drain the swamp. And so this is a classic example of that. Now I think companies are finally starting to drain the swamp, right? Because the alligators weren't biting them. But it was chaotic. That was really the name of the game early on in February, March, and April. So.
Yes. Well, it certainly was, not just in the mobility sphere, I think, but
everybody.
Yes. Can you tell us a bit more about some of the challenges and the opportunities associated with this? Because you touched on, the benefits of the cost and the sort of the quick solution as it.
You nailed it in terms of when you said it's not as simple as it appears to be, and I think that's one of the key issues around virtual assignments. I think this idea of the work moving to the employee is both the opportunity and the challenge for virtual assignments, because it creates both sides of that same coin. Virtual assignments minimize the physical need to move the employee, right? So you don't really have to, unless you've got those sort of tangential business trips or short-term assignments during that period of time where they're doing that job. But the most obvious opportunity to me is the fact that you don't physically have to move the employee or the family. There's a huge amount of time that is spent organizing the move, getting the move done, orienting the family, having the family adapt. It's just a lot of time and a lot of money. So I think that's, for me, the immediate opportunity that virtual assignments presents is savings around time and costs for companies in terms of getting talent to do what is needed where they need it, right? So that to me is the key one. I mean, there are a number of other ones, but I believe this one for me is sort of the key area that is driving the adoption of these types of policies. The challenges, well, there's lots of challenges, and I think the way I like to put it is virtual assignments is about managing risk exposure. There's a range of risks that cross over many different areas. Corporate tax, personal income tax, immigration, work permits, local labor laws, things like who determines, and we'll get into this more later, but for example, what health plan or what holiday or vacation schedule should the employee be administered on? Is it the place where he's working from home, or is it the location where he's employed, right? I mean, there are answers to these questions, but the key point is there's all these risks that we didn't anticipate before, and now we've got to manage them and deal with them. Tax is a key one, right? Permanent establishment. The employee says, "I'm now working in Singapore," and the mobility says, "What?" And then in the meantime, Singapore tax authorities get wind of this person working, and then they say, "Well, wait a minute, you guys don't even have an entity here in Singapore. Maybe we need to talk to your corporate headquarters about this, and potentially this raises the risk of a corporate tax liability in Singapore for the entire company," right? So these are I'm providing kind of an exaggerated situation, but the point is these exist and they need to be evaluated. So the real challenges here are, how do you evaluate these risks systematically? How do you identify them? How do you evaluate them? And then how do you make a decision? Because ultimately, a virtual assignment may not be feasible, depending on the scenario, right?
Yes.
So sorting out the benefits of the virtual assignment are actually probably the easier part of the exercise, right? I mean, there's no move, potentially, right? There's no education or traditional mobility type relocation policies, but understanding the risks and making a decision process to support the decisions around how to use these assignments is really the more complex and challenging area. And if you mess up on one of them, like the corporate tax or even personal income tax filing, if you're not providing tax filing assistance and the employee doesn't file, the tax authorities often come to the company for some kind of redress, right? And so it creates a lot of various difficult and knotty issues that need to be addressed.
So I suppose one thing, it almost goes without saying, really, but not every role is suitable for this kind of treatment, is it, Fred?
Well, you're absolutely right, and I think that part of assessing the risk is understanding what roles can be used for virtual assignments. Manufacturing, oil and gas exploration, those are jobs that have to be done on the ground physically, and a virtual assignment just won't work. On the other hand, high-tech companies where employees are working on coding or software, things of that sort, certainly that to me would be a natural extension of the types of roles that would be effective under a virtual assignment type arrangement. So it is a risk that needs to be assessed, and again, I can't emphasize it too much. It's the notion of how do you assess these risks and make the right decisions. Figuring out what the actual policies are for this type of policy, for the benefits for this type of policy, is really quite straightforward. There's no relocation, there's no education expenses for dependent children. It's really about managing and understanding the risks to determine whether to use the assignment in the first place. And that's the key aspect of this new remote working arrangement is what are the risks and how do we deal with them, or can we, right? And if we can't, then maybe we shouldn't do it.
Good point. Okay. Actually, what you're saying there about what we're talking about in terms of suitability brings me on to the softer side of this, because obviously traditional mobility has allowed people to build a rapport with perhaps the new team that they're leading, over time by working alongside each other and problem solving, etc., maybe a bit of socializing as well. But if you're doing a virtual assignment, you've got, say you're parachuted in, you've got to kind of take charge of a project and a team. It's particularly difficult if you're on completely different time zones or working cultures are different. How can you address those sorts of issues?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I think sharing a physical space with other team members, your work colleagues, your managers, it creates a natural environment to bond, to build relationships, rapport, right? Being in the same location means everybody pretty much follows the same work schedules as well, right? As soon as you remove that one individual from that location, then you open up these questions about team building and so forth. But my feeling is that a lot of the basic issues around team building can be managed, and I think we've seen that right since the pandemic. The new technology platforms that we got have really enabled socializing and bonding through a virtual platform. And so I think to that extent, I think most of the problems can be dealt with virtually, but even cultural ones, right? I mean, most companies have traditionally offered cultural training, right? That certainly can and could be done virtually in all senses of the word. But I think that the real challenging one is the time zone, right? I mean, frankly, how do you have somebody working in Asia to support a European or a US team, right? Virtually, that becomes much more of a challenge. And I think the other key one, which is really fundamental, is certain people deal with virtual interactions better than others, right? And so you want to make sure you're picking the right people who can handle this. How do you assess the aptitude for that? You have an aptitude or an IQ or a virtual aptitude test that allows you to select the right candidates, right? I mean, but I think these are, location and skill set are, for me, the key ones in this virtual environment that you got to get right.
Yes, sure. Okay. Actually, you remind me, I used a long time ago, I used to work with a team in India. I was based in the UK, and I used to set my alarm for 2 a.m. and get up.
Yeah. Well, not everybody can do that.
Not great for family life, though, I have to say.
And then that defeats the purpose of one of the benefits of virtual assignments, which is potentially the enhanced life-work balance, right? So,
yes.
Is that what you want as a company? So for me, that's a risk that needs to be assessed, right? And you need a process to assess those risks.
Yes, sure. Which kind of brings me on to our final question, really, which is about, there are all these complexities and so on, but what would you recommend mobility teams do in terms of forming a framework for this? And, what are your general recommendations on this?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this is a key question that a lot of our clients and a lot of companies are asking at this moment. What is the best way to proceed on this? I think the concept of having different mobility pathways with different policy solutions has been one that's been in the works for quite some time. We've seen companies. It used to be just assignment length and that was it, right? Now it's role. What are you doing? What's the talent plan for this person? You know, there are a lot of other factors now that play into the types of policies, and companies are broadening the types of policies they use to address these different scenarios. Yeah. So virtual assignments really I see as one additional option that companies will have in their suite of policies within the framework to deal with specific types of mobility, which at this time is quite hindered. So, for me, it's not, virtual assignments will only work in some cases, not in all of them. So it's really one part of your arsenal. It is not the arsenal. It is part of it, right? And it will help you deal with specific scenarios where you need to use it and where it works. Key issues to address: the risks, understanding them, having a plan to mitigate those risks. Immigration, compliance. I mean, it really is compliance are the key issues around risk. How do you deal with those? How do you have a robust decision-making framework within the company to allow you to make the right decisions to when to use this type of policy? That's the first key one. The other one is making sure your global mobility team has the right skill set now to manage this new complexity, because it's a different world. Do you create a cross-functional team that works with global mobility to assess each virtual assignment? Corporate tax, immigration, HR, and law, how do they get involved in the process? These are all the areas that you're going to have to now look at. And so you need people on your team who can handle this stuff. Traditionally, global mobility has been transactional, right? But this is forcing mobility to be strategic. So you need to be able to offer the strategic advice and the options that the business needs. You need the people to support that. So for me, those are the two key areas that I would, as an organization, start focusing on.
Thank you. That point about strategy is great. Thank you very much, Fred. It's been really, really fascinating. I'd like to know more. And the survey, you'll be releasing the latest one soon?
The way we normally do it is the participants generally get the first cut of it, and then later on we release it to the general.
Of course.
So either way, it'll be available, and But I do, just to sum up. I mean, again, thank you for asking me on to talk about this. But this is an area I find absolutely fascinating. It's one of the newest and most exciting things that have come along in a long time, and it's also one of the more challenging ones. So it's a very unique, but I think the opportunities are quite large on this one.
Yes, as you say, it's evolving. Okay, so thank you very much again.
All right, Claire, thanks so much.
Thanks. Many thanks again to Fred for his very thorough and forward-thinking approach there. We'll see you again very soon for the first of this summit's mobility masterclasses. Emery Castaneda, who's a global mobility expert and leader, is going to outline the global mobility capabilities we need now. There's just time to check your emails or to take some refreshments. So we'll see you again after this 5-minute break. welcome back. Emery Castaneda is an experienced and skilled global mobility manager who is based in the Philippines. With roles at 3 multinational organizations in the last 10 years and a keen interest in industry research, Emery is highly regarded in the global mobility community in APAC and beyond as a leader and thinker. This masterclass is designed to be an overview and a kind of taster session for a follow-up workshop where participants can work through a number of scenarios and case studies with Emery in real time. You'll find a link for that at the end of this session. So let's join her now to hear her thoughts on the capabilities we need now.
Mobility Masterclass. Global mobility capabilities we need now. Your speaker is Emery Castaneda, Global Mobility Expert and Leader.
Hello everyone. I am so happy to be given this opportunity by FEM to speak to you today. I'm going to talk about the evolution of global mobility and the capabilities required of us now. Before I begin, I would like to share more personal information about me. I am Marie Castaneda, and I'm speaking to you from my home in Rizal, Philippines. I am Global Mobility Manager covering Asia region for Unilever, and I have almost 10 years experience in global mobility and human resources. I found my niche at 38 years old, would you believe? Before global mobility, I actually dabbled into banking, telecom, oil and gas, under the functions of sales and marketing, project management, even brand management. My HR and global mobility journey started around 2011, during the time when shared services centers were being set up in the Philippines. I project managed the transition of HR operations work in the company I was working for in Chevron, and an opportunity to lead the team came up, and I dove right in. I realized that one of the teams I would be managing was doing back office global mobility work, and the rest, as they say, is history. I've had international assignments as well in California and Houston, and have traveled extensively in the US and Asia. So, on the more personal side, I'm a mother of 3. I'm also an artist, a writer, a meditation practitioner in my own time. And most of all, I'm very proud to say that I'm a lifelong learner. So today, I'm going to talk to you about how global mobility has evolved over time and what is required of us and our teams today. Here's a summary of the topic that I will be talking about today. A good summary slide to refer to. This course is actually based on the paper I wrote late 2019, long before the pandemic actually started. It was actually entitled The Future of Global Mobility. However, the pandemic has accelerated the demands from us for certain skills, signs of the times. The future has suddenly become now. So today I will let you through how the requirement from our teams began from being transactional, then consultative, and now leadership. So a bit of history. Long ago, before globalization of talent has become a basic talent strategy of organizations, and when expatriations were seldom taken, administration of international assignee compensation, benefits, and relocation activities were implemented on an ad hoc basis. Very, different from each case by case. But as technological advances decrease the cost of transportation and communication, a kind of time and space compression effect, the technological advancement apparent in the 1990s greatly reduced the cost of international trade and investment, thus making it possible to organize and coordinate global production. The advent of globalization has really pushed global mobility to go beyond the ad hoc function. So we were mostly transactional at the start, understandably. We saw global mobility teams starting to be more organized, and there were tremendous effort in establishing process-oriented and operational teams. Understandably, structure consistency needed to be achieved. Volume was the name of the game. During this time, particularly in the early 2000s, we see centralization of GM services, creation of back office support teams as a result of these efforts. GM practitioners were focused on improving their process improvement skills. So we were hearing about Lean Sigma, Kaizen, project management, and I was actually right smack in the middle of that. Remember when I told you earlier, I was doing project management work to transition HR operations work into the Philippines. And then we have seen great big service companies taking on offshore back office services for global mobility. And this efficiency and cost saving measure only became possible because of standardization. I was part of this movement. And I was really, very comfortable doing that. But then, as always, change had to happen. We needed to be more consultative. Not long after organization and order was achieved, that the shift to another phase came to global mobility. Global mobility needed to mature beyond having consistent process as we realize people have different situations and we can only standardize so much. Diversion from standard processes and benefits was inescapable as business takes the front wheel. In parallel to a more strategic requirement from human resources, so does the GM function needed to have policies and processes that are more aligned with business goals. This usually involved managing unique assignment situations to deliver the talent requirement. And the focus was not only delivering world-class processes, but also making the customer experience pleasant and flawless. So suddenly, the focus changed from the process to the person. The human side of GM needed to emerge. Thus, global mobility teams were demanded to exhibit customer focus, and professionals were expected to have consultative and partnering skills. The project managers, the process improvement engineers needed to step back for those customer focused individuals. So as technology continued to have exponential leaps, and this is, now already, this is very familiar for us, changes are happening in a faster pace. Startups begin to mushroom, while organizations believed to be stable either folded up or transformed very quickly. The COVID-19 pandemic, which happened in the early months of 2020, accelerated what business industries were dubbing as the future of work. So because of this pandemic, the future quickly became now. And what we in GM were only trying to visualize and make sense of needed to be implemented immediately. I'm sure you will agree with me on that. So the bar became higher as the speed to make decisions on talent mobility became faster than ever. Who best knows how to do this but the GM expert? Thus, this is the time that we needed to wear the bigger hat of leadership. Even we were only just beginning to navigate the consultative hat. Lucky for those teams who've quickly transformed their service quality to be more consultative and partnering. I can only imagine, though, how hard it is for GM individuals who got comfortable doing transactional work to transform quickly into the demands of leadership. So the case for leadership begins. Why are we asked to lead before we actually identify the capabilities of leading? Why are we being asked to lead? The speed of change leaves organizations with no time to passively learn as developments transpire right before their eyes. Bold moves need to be done at times, not looking if others are doing the same. We used to do that, but can't happen now anymore. So, expertise on critical matters that could spell make or break in success need to be activated. And global mobility teams holds this expertise in tax, immigration, and employment laws compliance, benefits and process experience that attract the right and sometimes elusive talent. Gone are the days that GM teams are mere implementers of strategies from HR. GM teams now need to work very closely with talent management to have an equal seat at the table, to partner and complement each other to deliver the desired outcome in talent acquisition and retention. So, what are the important skills and capabilities we need to be able to lead? To be able to have the seat at the table and stay there needs to be three important capabilities from GM leaders and team members. So I'm going to tell you all about the three capabilities now and how it usually manifests as attributes in different people. So look for them from you or from your team leaders or team members. So first is agility. It's a person who quickly spots a problem and immediately tries to design a solution upon the spotting of the problem. And it's someone who also takes the risk to experiment and tries the solution. And with the objective of delivering a minimum viable product or the MVP and not being bogged down by perfection. And he's also the one who's open to recycle the solution to improve it along the way. So it really needs a certain level of humility to be agile and definitely unwavering determination to improve things along the way. So that's agility for you. Another important capabilities under leadership expectation is change management. Primarily, this person has no fear for ambiguity. In fact, in certain extent, this person actually enjoys ambiguity. Sounds weird, but there are people really like that. Not only a change follower, this person is also a change enabler. He has this eye that detects the need for change, and he also has the ability to qualify the effects and articulate the effects if the change is not done. And most importantly, the ability to land the change. Land meaning be able to work with different people to make sure the change is really implemented. And the third one, under the call for leadership, are the leadership qualities itself. We are called to lead, all of us, even if we do not manage people in our organization. And we cannot do this complexity on our own. In fact, we should not do this complexity on our own because there are experts to mobilize. Rather, leadership is the ability to mobilize the relevant people. So the person who has leadership qualities can influence all the involved stakeholders through credibility and exquisite communication. So you see, the global mobility of the future is now, and it's all about leadership. And I would simply put the dynamics of these three capabilities in this illustration. Agility and change management enabled all throughout by the leadership qualities. Remember, leadership qualities is the enabler for these two capabilities. So I would like to thank you for listening and watching this masterclass session with me. Before I let you go though, I'd like to say that there's a level up session that I will be hosting soon related to this. This time, the session will be an interactive and live one. It's called Global Mobility Now, Bringing It All Home. We will be learning these concepts more deeply, applying them into real life and relevant situations. This upcoming session is for everyone, whether you are a new GM consultant or a seasoned GM expert or leader. And this session has limited slots, so we can maintain that in interactivity and make sure we learn from each other. So I hope if you're interested, you can sign up very soon. Until then, thank you very much. This has been Marie Castañeda. See you again soon.
Thank you very much again, Anne-Marie. That was a really useful overview of changing skills we now need in the industry, and I'm looking forward to the workshop on the 16th of September. I hope you found today's talks helpful. We have 3 more great sessions for you on day 2, and I'll just give you a very quick overview. We'll begin with a panel discussion examining relocation in the new normal. We'll be looking at how corporate professionals and service providers are adapting to the new environment and all aspects of supporting employee moves from the logistical to the cultural. This will be followed by our second mobility masterclass of the summit. Archana Srinivasan and Nandakumar Kirupanandan of design and engineering firm Atkins will take us through their plan for a global mobility reboot and also show you how their 2 departments work so successfully together. Then finally, we will round things off in traditional style with our closing panel discussion. For obvious reasons, in the midst of the pandemic this year, we at FEM took the decision, very sadly, to postpone all our awards, the Emmas, until 2021. However, as we all know, even when we're in the grip of a crisis, it's still really important to take a step back and review our work and also to acknowledge the successes and the lessons learned. So we have 3 of our seasoned Emma's judges, including a winner as well, who will use our awards criteria as a sort of framework to talk about the qualities that constitute excellence in a mobility team, individual or service provider partner. I hope that you find it both interesting and encouraging, and I hope that it also helps you to think about your 2021 entries and get started too. So, hope to see you on day 2. Many thanks again to all our fabulous speakers today and to our summit sponsors, Air Inc., Alto Vita, HSBC and Removals Management Worldwide. And of course, thank you to all of you for tuning in. Thanks so much.